The real danger is not that computers will begin to think like men, but that men will begin to think like computers. Sidney J. Harris wrote those words decades ago, long before any of us could ask a machine to write our emails, generate our art, plan our meals, debug our code, or tell us what to think about the meaning of life on a Tuesday afternoon when the existential dread hits a little harder than usual. He wasn't warning us about artificial intelligence. He was warning us about ourselves. And here we are. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with a difficult question, a genuinely difficult one, and didn't reach for your phone? When was the last time you wrestled with a decision, a creative block, a moral dilemma, and simply stayed with it, sat in the discomfort of not knowing? Let your own mind churn through the ambiguity, the messiness, the beautiful inefficiency of human thought. If you're being honest, it's probably been a while, because something has shifted, something quiet, something most of us haven't fully named yet. We are in a relationship, not the kind we usually talk about, not the romantic kind, not the platonic kind, not the professional kind. This is something stranger, something newer, something that doesn't have clean boundaries or a label that fits neatly on a form. We are in a three-way relationship, a throuple, if you will, and the three participants are you, other people, and artificial intelligence. Now, before you dismiss that as a metaphor stretched too thin, consider how this actually works in your daily life. You wake up, you ask an AI assistant about the weather, you use an algorithm-curated feed to decide what news matters. You consult a chatbot about how to phrase a difficult text message to a friend. You ask a large language model to help you brainstorm ideas for a project. You let a recommendation engine choose your next movie, your next song, your next purchase. You run your writing through an AI tool to check not just grammar, but tone, clarity, persuasiveness, qualities that used to be the domain of human editorial judgment. And then, somewhere in the middle of all of that, you also talk to actual human beings, your partner, your co-worker, your therapist, your mother. But increasingly, those conversations happen after you've already consulted the machine. The AI gets the first draft of your thinking. The humans get the refined version. We don't usually describe this as a relationship. We call it productivity, efficiency, progress. But relationships are not defined by what we call them. They're defined by the patterns of dependence, trust, and influence that form between the participants. And by that definition, the one forming between humanity and artificial intelligence is among the most intimate relationships most of us have ever entered. And we walked into it without a single conversation about boundaries. To understand how we got here, you have to understand a concept from cognitive psychology called cognitive offloading, the perfectly natural, deeply human tendency to use external tools to reduce the burden on our internal mental processes. This is not new. This is ancient. When a prehistoric human carved a notch into a bone to track the phases of the moon, that was cognitive offloading. When a merchant in medieval Florence kept a ledger instead of memorizing every transaction, that was cognitive offloading. When you write a grocery list on the back of a receipt, when you set a reminder on your phone, when you use a calculator instead of doing long division in your head, all of it, cognitive offloading. And for most of human history, the tools we offloaded onto were passive. They stored information. They performed computations. They held knowledge in place so we could retrieve it later. But they didn't generate knowledge. They didn't interpret. They didn't suggest, recommend, or create. The notebook didn't write back. The calculator didn't propose a different equation. The filing cabinet didn't reorganize itself based on what it predicted you'd need next. AI is different. AI is not a passive storage device. It is an active cognitive participant. When you ask a chatbot to help you write an essay, it doesn't just hold your notes. It produces sentences. It constructs arguments. It mimics reasoning. When you ask it for advice on a relationship problem, it doesn't just retrieve relevant information. It synthesizes, weighs, and delivers a perspective. When you use it to brainstorm, it doesn't sit quietly like a blank page waiting for your ideas. It offers its own. And this changes the nature of offloading entirely. We are no longer just offloading memory and computation. We are offloading thinking itself. The generation of ideas, the process of reasoning, the work of creativity, the labor of judgment. This is a threshold, a quiet one, unmarked by fanfare, but a threshold nonetheless. Because when you offload storage, you free up cognitive resources to think more deeply. But when you offload thinking, you may be freeing yourself from the very process that makes you a thinker at all. Now here is where the relationship gets complicated. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called automation bias, the tendency of human beings to favor suggestions from automated systems over their own judgment or the judgment of other humans, even when the automated system is wrong. This has been studied extensively in aviation, medicine, and military decision-making. Pilots have followed automated navigation systems into dangerous situations because the computer said it was safe. Doctors have accepted AI-generated diagnoses that contradicted their own clinical experience because the algorithm seemed more objective. Soldiers have deferred to targeting systems even when something felt off, because the machine's confidence was presented in clean percentages, and the human's doubt was messy, uncertain, hard to articulate. The pattern is consistent. When a human and a machine disagree, the human is increasingly likely to assume the machine is right. Not because the machine has proven itself infallible, but because the machine presents its outputs with a kind of calm, unwavering certainty that humans find psychologically reassuring. We trust confidence. We always have. In other humans, confidence can be a signal of competence, experience, or knowledge. But in machines, confidence is an interface design choice. An AI doesn't feel certain. It generates outputs based on statistical patterns and presents them in a format that resembles certainty. And we, wired by millennia of social evolution to defer to confident authorities, accept it. This is what researchers call algorithmic authority, the implicit trust we place in algorithmic systems, not because we understand how they work, but precisely because we don't. The opacity of the system becomes, paradoxically, a source of its credibility. We assume that something we can't fully comprehend must be operating on a level beyond our own reasoning. The black box becomes an oracle, and so the Throuple develops a power imbalance. You might think you are the one in charge. You're the user after all. You type the prompt. You ask the question. You decide whether to accept or reject the output. But the dynamics of automation bias and algorithmic authority mean that the machine's influence on your thinking is often invisible. You don't notice when an AI suggestion subtly reframes your question. You don't notice when a recommendation algorithm narrows your options in ways that shape your preferences. You don't notice when the machine's confident phrasing makes you slightly less likely to trust your own tentative, uncertain, deeply human intuition. You think you're using a tool, but the tool is also using you. Not with intent, not with malice, but through the simple mechanics of how human psychology responds to automated confidence. In 1998, two philosophers, Andy Clark and David Chalmers published a paper that would become one of the most debated ideas in modern philosophy of mind. They called it the extended mind thesis. The argument was deceptively simple. They asked, where does the mind stop and the rest of the world begin? The traditional answer is obvious. The mind is in the brain. Thinking happens inside the skull. The boundary of cognition is the boundary of the body. But Clark and Chalmers proposed something radical. They said that if an external tool plays the same functional role in cognition that an internal mental process would, then that tool is, for all practical purposes, part of the mind. Their famous thought experiment involved a man named Otto, who has Alzheimer's disease. Otto can't rely on his biological memory, so he carries a notebook everywhere. When he needs to remember an address, he checks his notebook. The notebook, they argued, functions as Otto's memory in the same way that a healthy person's hippocampus does. Therefore, the notebook is part of Otto's cognitive system. It is part of his mind. At the time, this was provocative. Today, it feels almost quaint. Because if a notebook can be part of the mind, what about a smartphone that holds not just your addresses but your entire social world, your schedule, your creative archives, your communication history? And if a smartphone can be part of the mind, what about an AI that doesn't just store information but actively generates responses, constructs arguments, offers solutions, and produces creative work that you then adopt, modify, and present as your own? If the extended mind thesis is correct, then AI is not just a tool you use. It is becoming a component of your cognitive system, a silent third participant in the act of thinking. And this is where the metaphor of the throuple stops being a metaphor and starts being a description. When you think through a problem with another person, you engage in what psychologists call distributed cognition. The thinking happens between you, not just within you. Ideas bounce, perspectives clash. Insights emerge from the interaction that neither person would have reached alone. The relationship itself becomes a thinking system. Now substitute the AI for one of those people. You pose a question. The AI responds. You react to its response. You refine. It generates again. You select, modify, reject, combine. The thinking is happening between you and the machine. Neither of you, if we can even say you to a machine, is doing it alone. But here's what makes this different from thinking with another human. When you think with another person, you're engaging with a consciousness. A being with experiences, emotions, biases, and a genuine perspective shaped by a life lived. The friction of that interaction, the disagreements, the misunderstandings, the moments where someone else's radically different viewpoint forces you to reconsider your own. That friction is not a bug. It's the mechanism by which human thought deepens. AI doesn't offer that friction in the same way. It offers fluency, speed, coherence, an impressive ability to mirror your patterns, anticipate your preferences, and deliver outputs that feel right. That feel, in a strange way, like what you were already thinking, only better phrased. But feeling right and being right are not the same thing. And better phrased is not the same as more deeply considered. The risk is not that AI will think for us in some dramatic, dystopian sense. The risk is subtler. It's that the ease of thinking with AI will make the hard work of thinking without it feel unnecessary. That the fluency of machine-assisted cognition will make the stumbling, uncertain, effortful process of genuine human thought feel like a waste of time. And slowly, imperceptibly, the muscle atrophies. Let's sit with this for a moment. Because the question at the heart of this throuple is not a technological question. It's not about processing power or neural networks or alignment research, as important as those things are. The question is a philosophical one, and it's devastatingly simple. If a machine helps you think every thought, write every word, make every decision, where do you end and where does it begin? This isn't science fiction, this is Tuesday. A writer uses AI to generate a first draft, then edits it into something publishable. Whose voice is on the page? A student uses a chatbot to understand a complex concept, then explains it in their own words on an exam. Whose understanding is being tested? A therapist uses an AI tool to generate treatment suggestions, then applies clinical judgment to select one. Whose expertise healed the patient? A person asks an AI how they should feel about a moral dilemma, reads the response, finds it persuasive, and adopts the position. Whose ethics are those? The honest answer is, it's genuinely unclear. And that lack of clarity isn't a failure of analysis, it's the nature of the situation. We are in a new kind of cognitive entanglement, and the old categories of my idea and the tool's output are breaking down. Some people find this terrifying, and there is something to be afraid of, not in the machine itself, but in the possibility that we become so comfortable with AI-assisted thinking that we lose the capacity for, or even the interest in, unassisted thought. That we forget what it feels like to stare at a blank page and pull something from nothing. To hold a complex problem in our minds long enough for a genuine insight to emerge. To be wrong, confused, uncertain, and to stay with that uncertainty until it teaches us something that fluency and speed never could. Because uncertainty is not a deficiency of human cognition. It is the texture of genuine thinking. It is the space where creativity, wisdom, and real understanding are born. And AI, for all its extraordinary capabilities, does not experience uncertainty. It simulates it, sometimes brilliantly, but it does not sit with it. It does not suffer through it. It does not emerge on the other side changed by it. We do, or at least we used to. But I want to be careful here, because the easy conclusion, the one that would get the most clicks, the most shares, the most performative head nodding, is the alarmist one. AI is making us stupid. AI is replacing human thought. AI is the beginning of the end of authentic creativity. That narrative is satisfying. It's clean, it's dramatic, and it's probably wrong. Or at least, it's only a fraction of the truth. Because the relationship between humans and their cognitive tools has never been purely parasitic. Writing didn't destroy memory, it transformed it. The printing press didn't kill intellectual culture, it democratized it. Calculators didn't eliminate mathematical reasoning. They freed mathematicians to work on harder problems. Every major cognitive tool in human history has been met with the same fear, that it would make us weaker, and every time the reality has been more nuanced. AI may be no different. Or it may be. That's the honest position. We don't know yet. What we do know is that the nature of the tool matters less than the nature of the relationship we form with it. A calculator in the hands of someone who understands mathematics is a lever. A calculator in the hands of someone who never learned to reason numerically is a crutch. The difference is not in the tool. The difference is in the human. And this is where the throuple metaphor becomes most useful. Because in any three-way relationship, the health of the dynamic depends not on eliminating any one participant, but on maintaining awareness, honesty, and balance among all three. The question is not whether we should use AI. That ship has sailed, docked, unloaded its cargo, and the cargo has already been integrated into the infrastructure of modern civilization. The question is, whether we can use it while remaining genuinely present in our own cognitive lives. Whether we can let it assist without letting it replace. Whether we can benefit from its capabilities without surrendering the effortful, sometimes painful, always deeply human process of thinking for ourselves. There is something worth preserving in the act of struggle. In the moment before the insight arrives, when you don't know the answer and no one and nothing is going to hand it to you. That moment is not a problem to be optimized away. It is the crucible in which human understanding is forged. Every great idea in the history of human thought was born in that space. Every work of art that has ever moved us came from someone who sat with confusion, frustration, and self-doubt long enough to transform it into something meaningful. Every moral breakthrough, every scientific revolution, every act of genuine creativity required a human being to endure the discomfort of not knowing, and to keep going anyway. AI cannot do that for us. Not because it lacks the processing power, but because the endurance itself is the point. The struggle is not an obstacle to understanding. The struggle is understanding. And so the real challenge of this strange new relationship we've entered, this cognitive throuple with ourselves, each other, and our machines, is not a challenge of technology. It's a challenge of character. Can we live alongside an intelligence that offers us effortless answers and still choose, sometimes, to do the hard work of finding our own? Can we accept the gift of cognitive assistance without becoming cognitively dependent? Can we remain, in the deepest sense, thinkers, even when thinking is no longer strictly necessary? I don't know the answer to that. And I think anyone who claims to know is not thinking hard enough about the question. But I do know this. The danger Sidney Harris warned us about all those years ago was never really about computers. It was about us, about the seductive efficiency of mechanical thinking, about the temptation to trade depth for speed, uncertainty for confidence, genuine understanding for the comfortable illusion of it. AI will continue to get more capable. It will continue to integrate more deeply into the way we work, create, decide, and relate to one another. The throuple is not ending. If anything, it's just beginning. The question that remains, the only question that ultimately matters, is not whether artificial intelligence will become truly intelligent. It's whether we will stay truly engaged in the difficult, messy, irreplaceable work of being human minds in a world that increasingly offers us the option not to be. And that is a question no algorithm can answer for you.